Okay, so in this demonstration, we're going to move on to dealing with the navigation and how you can make these links a lot more user-friendly and more intuitive to use. Right now, if I hover my mouse, you see over in this area, nothing is happening, but if I hover over the actual words for the links, then I actually get the little pointer icon, the little hand icon that tells me it's a link. I'm going to show you how you can make some hover states, but then also I want to show you how you can adjust an anchor tag, which is natively inline, so that it behaves like a block level element and takes up this entire block so that you can hover and change it, and it's more intuitive and clickable. Okay, so first of all, let's just deal with making the hover change, the hover state different. So let's go back to elements, and if we go to our nav, see nav ul li, and let's just pick one of the a tags inside of the list items, and you see that when I hover it, it shows, in fact, it is only inline. It's not selecting the entire block, it's just selecting the actual words themselves, okay? And that's the way that links natively work, is that they are inline, and that's what that means, is that it only takes up the amount of space that is necessary to display the text. Okay, so what I want to do is, before I try to make it block and all of that stuff, let's go ahead and show you how to make a hover state so that we can have this thing, um, you know, actually change states whenever we hover our mouse over it. Now, if you look over here, it shows that the section banner nav ul lia is selected. Well, I want to actually copy this, and the reason is because I'm going to show you how to use what's called a pseudo state, or a pseudo selector, and it is to create a hover state. So to do that, I'm going to create a new style, and I'm going to replace this just plain old A like that, but after the A, do not type a space, just type a colon, no spaces, and the word hover. If you type a space, it will not work. So we're going to create a hover state. So this is saying that when something hovers, the mouse hovers over the A tag that is in the list item in the nav and section banner, then do the following. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to change the color. For right now, let's just set the color to something else. Let's set it to green, for instance, so that we have something there. And then you see that it's actually working now when I hover it. All right, now if we wanted to actually be able to get the right value, what we could do is come over here, and let's say that we're going to choose this E9FF hexadecimal. We'll copy that, and let's jump back over here, and let's change that value from green. And you notice that it shows that it's sort of grayed out, and the reason that it shows it being grayed out is because it's a hover state, because we're not currently hovering over it. All right, but that is actually working. And so if I wanted to, do so, I could go over here to the inspector style sheet. I can click that, and then I never have to worry about it disappearing in my elements panel and having a hard time finding it. So this is how you can always jump back and find it. All right, so that's where that is right now. Okay, and so you also might say, okay, well, what if we just change the background color so that it looks like a big button? Well, let's try that, and I want to show you something. So I can come right here in my inspector view here, and I can also start typing. It just doesn't give me tooltips, remember, but I'm going to type background, and I'm going to just say that the background in the hover state is going to become an RGBA value. Let's say it's RGBA, and then I'll put some sort of value in here. Let's say that it's going to be a tint of black. So we'll say 000, and then at the end for the alpha, let's say that it's 0.35, for instance. Okay, and then I can do 0.35, and then I need to make sure that I terminate it at the end with my terminator. And let's see how that looks. Well, it's not working out here, right? Ah, but it is working there. Now, see, that's not attractive. What we'd ideally like is for that entire anchor to take up the entire block so that when we move our mouse, it's clickable, right? So let's jump back over into elements. And just remember, we can always go back to sources and get our styles there. And let's look at the regular A tag, okay, right here. And I'm going to raise this up a little bit. So right now, as we already said, that the display type of the anchor is inline. That is the native way that it works. Well, what I can do is I can tell it to be display, and I can tell it to sort of fake itself and be block, like that. Okay, and so now it's behaving as it's a block, as if it's a block, and look what's happening. That's really cool. All right, and so you know, just by the nature of me doing that, I was able to change everything, including the hover state. And that's something that's really important to understand, is that whenever you change something on the main element, like in this case, the A tag, it will cascade to also be the same way in the hover state. And so if you want something to change in the hover state, then you would need to make the change in the hover state. So for instance, we already have a color for this, and what we did in the hover state, if you remember, is we changed the background color and we changed the text color. Those are the two things that are different that we want to happen. If we wanted to have an underline there, we could say something like text decoration, and then we could say underline, and then see, it'll actually allow me to, oops, underline. It does give me a tooltip there. And so when I hover, it gives me underlines, but I don't like that. I don't want to keep that. So I'm actually going to remove that. But the point is that I was able to make that change. The other thing I could also do is if I wanted to have a margin where it moved, where it got bumped over or something, I could do that as well. But again, I'm not going to do that. So let's go ahead real quickly and let's go find our A tag again over here. And the other thing that I kind of would like to do is I'd like to add padding around it, because right now the thing is very, they're just very close together. So I can also go after display block and I can say padding. And I don't want to add it on the left and right. I just want to add it on the top and bottom. So let's do like maybe 5 pixels. And then we'll do 0 for the left and right. And that's a little bit more spread out, and they're nicer because they're a little bit bigger. Now the other thing that I could do too is I could change the orientation so that they're not all stacked on top of each other, because right now it takes up a pretty large chunk of the the visual real estate up here. All right, so there's some other things that I can do. And oh, by the way, make sure you don't accidentally click on these, because you're going to lose everything you've got. So in fact, let's go ahead and let's copy what we have so far and put it into our actual document so that that doesn't accidentally happen. So if we go into our sources, first let's go into our entire style sheet. Let's select all, copy, and then we're going to go select all in our Komodo edit CSS and paste. And then now the other thing I want to do is I want to go into this inspector style sheet where I created the hover state. And I want to copy that rule, and we'll find the appropriate spot for it here. Let's go. It would be after this banner nav ULLIA. Okay, so we're going to come in. Actually, let's fix this so that let's clean it up a little bit. And that should be tabbed in. And then we'll paste that there, and let's fix that up so that it's tabbed in properly. All right, and then we can save this file, and that way if we come over here and refresh, we haven't lost everything. In fact, it's now just correct. Okay, so now the next thing I wanted to show you is if this doesn't take up so much real estate right here, what we can also do is we can tell each containing list item, because the list item is a block element that is containing the anchor, which is a block element now because we told it to be inside of the list item, but the list item itself is like the parent container. And so if we want to float the list items side by side, because these are natively blocked, then we can sort of trick them. We don't tell them to be inline. Instead, what we do is we use a thing called a float. And This gets a little bit more advanced, but I'm just going to show you a really simple way of doing this because it is something that's really helpful when you're doing navigation to just be able to apply this. So if you were to go to this list item, okay, and then over here in the styles to the right, it has a list style of none. We're going to add to that, and we're going to tell it so that each one of them, first of all, let's say that they each take up a third of the screen. So let's say width, and then we'll say 33, let's say 0.33%, so that we get as close to, you know, how much space there is as possible. So, and now if you hover over the list item, you can see that it's actually only taking up 33%. It's hard to tell because the background color of nav is that dark blue. So, but if you hover here, you can actually see it happening with the Chrome Inspector. Okay, so now they're 33%, but now how do we get them to sit side by side on the same line? Well, we can do a thing called a float. We can say float, left. And then they float next to each other, but look what's happening. It's doing this really weird thing here. Okay, well, now we're starting to talk a little bit about positioning. And so I don't want you to get too confused, but anytime you float something, it's confusing the browser, and it's basically thinking that you're pulling it out of the document flow, that it sort of acts like, oh, well, now you're not really in the place you're supposed to be, list item, and list item. You're not really here. And so the UL says, hey, I'm going to go ahead and collapse myself because I don't have any content. Well, that's not true. So what we have to do for the UL is we have to go over here and add a new rule for the UL, and it's called overflow, like this. And then we need to say hidden. And then what it does is anytime you have something, a parent element that has floated children, you need to set the parent element to be overflow hidden. Otherwise, that thing that just happened where it showed it collapsing, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so now at least this navigation bar is not taking up so much real estate, right? So let's go ahead and do that thing again where we go to our sources, to our style sheet, select everything, copy it, and let's pull it back in to our regular Komodo style sheet, select all, paste, save, okay, and then let's come back over here, hit refresh, make sure that it did in fact save our styles, and it looks like we're good. And so now, like if you were to click on miscellaneous stuff, it should jump down there, right, no problem. And you see up here it shows me the pound MISC because it went to miscellaneous. If I reload my page, everything should still look good, right? Okay. One thing now admittedly that's kind of bugging me is that this aside that's right here. So if we jump back to it and I inspect this element and I jump to the aside, is the aside is sitting like right on top of this navigation, and it just doesn't, I don't think it looks really good. I kind of like the distance between these two things so far. You know, maybe we could adjust that again later, but right now I want it to be, you know, so that there's more space below it. So I could also give it a bottom padding. We can say padding bottom like this. And then that way, if we do a bottom padding, let's say maybe 1.5%, maybe, something like that. And then it sort of bumps it off of there a little bit. And that looks a little bit better. And by default, the other thing that we could do too is come up above at the very top of the banner. And we can also give it a top padding so that it's not sitting right at the edge, top edge of the viewport. This browser window is called a viewport. And so we'll give it a padding top. And then we'll do top, like that. And let's just say that that one's like, I don't know, 3% or something, maybe a little bit more. Something like that. I don't know. Maybe we could have that be equal and say that it's 1.5%. Let's just try that and see. And that's acceptable for right now. And we may end up changing this again. So this is a good kind of starting place for us. And then, you know, we're going to edit the text as well. And then later, you know, we can also see about possibly having this live somewhere else. All right. So I'm going to end this video here, move on to the next one.